Uh-oh.
In her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of yesterday's Matchroom versus Queensberry tournament, Oscar De La Hoya got it in his head that they should do a similar tournament here in America between a Goldenboy stable and a Top-Rank stable in Las Vegas, presumably on Turkey Al Sheikh's dime. As Turkey is the one who made yesterday's tournament possible, Oscar would like to see something like that happen here in America, and I wouldn't mind it, but the situation is slightly different, and I don't think that Oscar realizes that. I don't think that most people realize what happened yesterday, that while Matchroom got swept,
For some reason, a lot of people have an axe to grind with Eddie Hearn. Personally, I think it's just because Matchroom is so much more successful than Goldenboy. And yeah, they're more successful than Top Rank 2 and Queensberry.
how do you figure that?
Eddie Hearn managed to turn what was a domestic, UK-based promotional outfit into a global enterprise that isn't even exclusive to the sport of boxing. I think people tend to forget that Matchroom promotes more than just boxing matches. But Eddie Hearn did take the company to another level that his father, his predecessor, Barry Hearn. UK boxing wasn't what it was until Eddie Hearn comes into the picture and changes the game, takes the company global. Up until Eddie Hearn, the boxing scene in the UK was as insulated as it is in Australia.
But all of that is a story for another day. The bottom line is, you didn't actually see Matchroom's best and brightest fighters in yesterday's tournament as good as it was. Whereas what Oscar is proposing, when you think about the names that he selected, he's talking about his A-level guys, his all-stars.
He would have to use his all-stars to stand any chance of winning a tournament because his stable isn't as deep as Matchroom's.
He's proposing that they use Virgil Ortiz, Ryan Garcia, William Zepeda, Zerto Ramirez, Floyd Schofield,
Right.
Jose Ramirez, Francisco Fonseca, and Arnold Barboza.
Francisco Fonseca?
You could tell that he was coming up short of names. So, for Virgil Ortiz, I suppose the logical choice would have to be Xander Zayas, and that would be a very big fight. Puerto Rico versus Mexico, that long-standing rivalry, you could really do something with that. So much so that I don't actually think that they would make that part of the tournament. That could be a main event unto itself that gets built into a very big pay-per-view. But just for argument's sake, you could match Virgil against Xander.
Or are you going to match against Ryan?
You could match Brian Norman against Ryan, and I'd pick Brian Norman 7 days out of 7 to kick the fucking crap out of Ryan Garcia because, like I've been saying, he's not very good, and you're not going to be able to pull all that crap you pulled on Devin with everybody. You don't just get to come in 3 pounds over and use all sorts of banned substances.
So you match Virgil against Xander, Ryan against Brian,
William Zepeda against Shakur Stevenson.
or Denis Berenchik, or Vasil Lomachenko.
Top Rank is very strong in the lightweight division. They've got a lot of hitters at that weight.
More than Goldenboy.
Oscar mentioned Floyd Schofield. Given where Floyd is in his career, the most even fight you could put him in against a top-ranked fighter would have to be against Keyshawn Davis.
Right?
He mentioned Jose Ramirez, a former champion, a former unified champion. You could put Jose in there with Teofimo. You could put Arnold Barboza in there with Raymond Muratalla. You could do that.
And Fonseca?
He can make the coffee.
Ouch.
But it still hasn't dawned on you yet, I don't think it has, that for Oscar De La Hoya's Goldenboy promotion stable to be able to compete, he would have to use his all-stars. He would have to use the fighters that they are most invested in. Where Matchroom, they don't have to do that because their stable's so deep. They've got plenty of fighters they can use for that tournament format. Whereas Goldenboy, they would be taking quite the gamble, matching this many of their top guys against top ranks fighters. And they haven't had much luck against top rank in the past.
What do you mean?
When Vasyl Lomachenko fought Jorge Linares, that was Top Rank versus Goldenboy.
Top Rank 1.
When Giovanni Santillán fought Alexis Rocha, that was Top Rank versus Goldenboy.
Top Rank 1.
When Sinicia Estrada took on Yo Costavalle, that was Top Rank versus Goldenboy.
Top Rank 1.
So you know, if history is any indicator of things to come, there's a strong possibility that if you made a tournament between the Top Rank boys and the Goldenboy Promotions fighters, the Top Rank boys might kick their ass. They've been kicking their ass.
And it would hurt Goldenboy Promotions a lot more if, say, Ryan Garcia lost to Brian Norman than, you know, if Ammo Williams loses to Hamza Shiraz.
I don't understand.
That it would hurt Goldenboy Promotions a lot more if, say, Floyd Schofield loses to Keyshawn Davis than if Philippe Hergovic loses to a Daniel Dubois.
Why?
Because Matchroom's got more where that came from. So your unbeaten guy Philippe Hergovic takes a loss. You still have unbeaten Justice Hooney. You still have unbeaten Johnny Fisher.
I think that's the only unbeaten heavyweight Matchroom had lying around. They've got more where that came from. But if Floyd Schofield, you know, if he goes in there against a Top Rank guy representing Goldenboy and he loses, does Goldenboy have another Floyd Schofield? If William Zepeda goes in there and he loses to a top-ranked guy, does Goldenboy have another William Zepeda? Essentially what I'm getting at is these fighters losing hurts Goldenboy more because they don't have as many bodies to spare. So, I mean, it's a good idea, and you can do it. You can try to do it here in America, but it would be a gamble for Goldenboy.
Because you have to use your all-stars in order to do a tournament, whereas Matchroom's stable is so deep, they don't have to do that.
Think wisely.
赢下比赛，然后这就是我和我的团队，然后努力的结果。然后所以说在这里要感谢我的团队，感谢我的朋友，感谢我的拳迷对我的支持，对我的鼓励，都非常好，都非常好。然后他的力量也在，但是今天我的防守也做得特别好，然后他有几拳，然后也打中我了，力量还在。因为在打这一拳之后，然后有一拳就看着打他的迎击拳，迎击拳之后假动作，然后晃他引他出拳，然后打他迎击拳，然后打中了，打中之后他脑子有点晕，然后又上去又补了一拳。下一步打谁？有2番战协议，然后 AG 没有对手，都可以。
And so Zhilei Chang is saying that he's willing to step in. He's willing to fight Anthony Joshua in September, presumably in September, if he has no opponent. Anthony Joshua himself on potentially fighting either Zhilei Chang or Daniel Dubois. He said, I've got to pick them off one by one. It's not going to be easy, but that's my mentality. So come one, come all. He, Daniel Dubois, has worked his way up the ladder. We'll see what happens in the near future.
I'm all right with a Chang fight just as much as I like a Dubois fight. I could go for either fight in September.
Though I have maintained throughout that Anthony Joshua's next fight taking place on British soil, that comes with certain parameters. That would make a Dubois fight, a Daniel Dubois showdown, more in keeping with the decorum, the audience, the nature of the event than a Chang fight. That while Chang would be a solid opponent in a dangerous fight, Daniel Dubois is just as dangerous, but he's younger and more marketable.
You think Anthony Joshua can beat Chang?
Well, he tends to do pretty good against southpaws. He's done well so far. I think he's about 2-1 against southpaws. You know, Charles Martin was a southpaw. Otto Wallin was a southpaw. He lost to Usyk.
He was a southpaw.
But in terms of physical dimensions and implementation, Zhilei Zhang and Usyk, they ain't got a whole lot in common, aside from both of them being southpaws.
That's it.
Zhang is a well-schooled boxer, well-schooled counterpuncher, very heavy, very big, and very strong, knows how to pick his punches. The drawback is he is an older man than Anthony Joshua, slower on his feet.
Doesn't have much of a work rate.
He's a bigger target. A much bigger target than Alexander Usyk was. Yeah, in terms of frame and dimensions, you could liken him more to a Charles Martin or an Otto Wallin than an Usyk. Usyk is makes for a very small, mobile target. The challenges would not be the same.
Zhang's frame is closer to that of a Charles Martin or an Otto Wallin than an Usyk.
What's this guy, about 6'6"? At or around there?
He took minimal punishment in the Deontay Wilder fight.
It's time for the boxing community at large, the boxing community in America and the boxing community across the pond, to put to bed the idea that Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder will ever materialize. Those of you that have been with this channel for many, many years now will know that I likened that situation to the Lennox Lewis versus Riddick Bowe situation. That fight that got away, that fight that never happened between transatlantic rivals.
The American versus the Brit, thought of as the two top heavyweights of their time, kind of like how Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, when they were both unbeaten and they were both champions.
There was a time when they were ranked as the number 1 and number 2 heavyweights.
Fury hadn't come back yet. Usyk was still at cruiserweight, so these were the number 1 and number 2 guys.
And they never fought like Lewis and Bowe never fought.
Zhang put the nail in the coffin with a hard counter right.
Took Wilder out of the picture. Now he's in the running.
Is he dangerous?
Yes, as stated, he's a crafty boxer, crafty southpaw, very strong, good counter puncher. His drawbacks is he ain't got the best engine, he's up there in age, and he's slow on his feet.
Doesn't have much of a work rate.
So how does AJ beat him? How do you see it happening? And the way I see it happening is, not a lot is going to happen in the beginning. He's going to give Zhang Zhang a lot of respect, move around, and stay behind his jab. Unlike Deontay Wilder, he's coordinated.
He can move.
For years, I heard people call this guy robotic. I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. I just think these people were repeating something that they must have heard someone say, because Anthony Joshua's movements are fluid. He can get on his feet, get on his toes, and move around. Use the ring. Stay behind his jab. Because he's a heavier fighter than, say, Deontay Wilder, he can land that jab with more authority and bring over that right hand.
To land that with more authority.
And even though I wouldn't call Anthony Joshua a speedster, he is pretty quick for a heavyweight. Emphasis on heavyweight. He's got snap on the jab. He's got snap on the right.
How does he win?
What he's going to do is let the fight go a few rounds. Let it drag on so that the pace of the fight will wear on the older, slower fighter. Try to make Zhang work for his meal while he sets him up for a big right hand.
What Zhang's gonna want to do is he's gonna want to kill him quick, within the first 6, because by now Zhang and his team know they can't let it get into the later rounds. Once it gets past the midway point, Zhang stops throwing and he only gets slower.
I think Anthony, with Ben Davison in his corner, they'll know. They've got to play it safe the first couple of rounds, because that's when Zhang is most dangerous. So you got to keep that jab in his face. Draw him out. If you can pop him with the right, you pop him with the right. But you don't commit to anything, not just yet.
I know Zhang has been looking devastating against Joe Joyce,
who's a slow and cumbersome heavyweight with leaky defense and no head movement.
No, he lost. He looked pretty good against Joseph Parker.
Through the first half he did, but in the second half he didn't do anything. And Joseph Parker's not built like Anthony. He's a shorter, stumpier guy, whereas Anthony's got more height, more length, to box from a safe distance.
More power, too.
And more ability than Deontay Wilder, I'd say. Deontay looked like a deer in the headlights yesterday, let's be honest. Anthony does everything better than Deontay.
Literally everything.
Anthony wouldn't be in unfamiliar territory because he's fought Zhang before, beat him in the amateurs many, many years ago, so he'll have that chip on his shoulder, but moreover, he is actually a lot more experienced in the pros than Zhang, even though he's younger.
I'd say Anthony stops him sometime after the midway point.
What about Daniel?
Well, it's a lot more challenging a fight than I used to think it was. You know, Daniel's really carved out a lane for himself, made a name for himself. Long gone are the days of calling Daniel Dubois a quitter as soon as things get rough and tough.
He likely got sick of hearing that shit, which is why we're seeing this surge from him. And being honest, I think Don Charles has been quite beneficial for young Daniel. A strong corner with the right mentality.
He used to train Derek Chisora.
So who better to toughen Daniel up and make a man out of him? Because that's what's going on. Daniel is maturating as a fighter and as a man. And that's what we've been seeing. He proved me wrong in the Jarrell Miller fight, and he proved me wrong again this weekend. He really did. The fight played out like I thought it would play out. That Daniel, you know, he's going to be there for the jab and he's going to be there for the straight. They're going to get in because the kid doesn't move his head. What I didn't figure was he'd show that kind of toughness and persistence, that he wouldn't let up and wouldn't let off, even in moments where he was buckled, where he looked hurt.
He powered through it, overwhelmed and outdogged Philippe Hergovic.
And even with that, you think that Anthony Joshua beats him. You've counted him out 2 times. Are you sure about this?
Yeah.
Why is that?
He's still the guy that got hurt and got dropped 3 times by Kevin Lorena, a cruiserweight. He's still the guy that got dropped and stopped by a cruiserweight, another one, in Alexander Usyk.
Smaller men and lighter punchers than Anthony Joshua have landed on Daniel and put him down.
But what about Big Gravy? And what about Philippe? Those are bigger men. They landed on Daniel. They didn't put him down.
Big Gravy doesn't have Anthony Joshua's height, length, or power. Snap on the jab, no big gravy. He kind of slaps with his punches. Because he's so big, the guy's hovering at or around 300 pounds, he can't put but so much leverage on his shots. Even if there's a lot of weight behind them, there's no snap.
He ain't got full range of motion.
Now, something similar applies to Filip Hrgovic, who's a little taller, a little longer, and a little leaner, but there's no snap on the shots. He's got a thudding jab and a thudding right hand, but no torque, no speed.
None?
Well, not as much as Anthony, I'll put it that way. And these two guys are not as battle-tested at this level as Anthony. Anthony's been in there with an Olympic gold medalist that has 53 knockouts in Klitschko, another one in Povetkin, a hard puncher with great inside game, very tricky within close quarters.
And he can crack.
The ups and downs that Daniel has experienced in his career so far, Anthony's experienced those same things at a much higher level, and he was able to pull himself back into it.
To a degree, so is Daniel.
Though not at the same level as Anthony Joshua. The maturation process that Daniel is now undergoing, Anthony's already been through that. He's already been there and done that.
There's levels.
So Daniel proved himself to be a stubborn customer, a tough customer this weekend with Filip Hrgovic.
Right?
And what I noticed is that Daniel was eating far too many right hands to my liking in the early goings of the match. Oh, granted that he took them well, but those were Filip Hrgovic's right hands, not Anthony Joshua's right hands. He drives his punches a lot better than Filip. There's more snap on them, more speed.
Filip is not as athletic as Anthony, doesn't have full range of motion like Anthony.
In a lot of ways, Daniel Dubois was charging Filip Hrgovic this weekend. He wanted to settle the score because Filip got under his skin with all that stuff he was talking about.
Danny showed a good engine.
Not a bad chin, but like I said, I don't think you're going to eat Anthony's right hands as easily as you ate Filip Hrgovic's. You're not going to take punches from him as easily as you took punches from Jarrell Miller. These are going to hurt. These are going to put you down. So if that is Anthony Joshua's next fight, I figure he knocks out Danny inside of 6 rounds.
It's a dangerous fight, make no mistake. Daniel's maturated.
Could he hurt Anthony Joshua? Of course he could. This is the heavyweight division. You're always one punch away from being knocked out, but they can both hurt each other. It's not one way.
Yeah, Danny can hurt AJ, but AJ can hurt him.
You know, Don Charles, he's not going to train Daniel Dubois for a boxing match to win a points decision. That's not going to be the strategy. The strategy is going to be taking Anthony Joshua out, rushing him.
Landing big punches.
That's what they're going to train him to do, prep him to do. So he won't be hard to find for Anthony Joshua. You won't have to look for the opportunity to throw to right because he's going to give it to you. He's going to make himself available for a big right hand or a big left hook.
I see Daniel being the aggressor and Anthony being a defender.
Creating space to give himself room to throw the right. And as Daniel Dubois barrels forward, he's going to walk right into it and get put down. That's how I see it.
You're still counting him out.
Well, listen, Daniel's been very impressive in his last 2 fights. He really has. And based on those 2 fights, I would give him very good odds against a lot of other heavyweights out there, but not this one.
Good odds against a Huey Fury, a Jared Anderson, maybe even a Joseph Parker.
Zhang?
I don't know about that.
You can do it. Commercially, this is a much bigger fight than a Chang fight would be, even though a Chang fight, that's not a tough sell. That's a good fight in and of itself. But if Anthony's next fight is taking place on UK soil, then Daniel Dubois would be the optimal opponent, the optimal choice. In keeping with the decorum of a Matchroom versus Queensberry kind of situation,
Daniel's the way to go.